You knew that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No. Why?
So you were close enough before you was down here, right? Right. Oh, I couldn't live like that. Yeah. Yeah, I did. child? Child, that's what you say, spit it out.
I wrote it about. I give these to
I think we're going up.
Hope that you all enjoyed your meal. I invite you to keep eating. If you're eating, please keep doing that. But if you are finished, I invite you to bring up your plates and your silverware because we're going to get started with our presentation here in just the next couple of minutes or so. So if you are eating, please keep doing that. But if you're finished, please bring up your plates and your silverware and bring it as Pam had directed. Thank you.
They're good.
Anything special?
Very sweet. Yeah.
Oh, happy birthday. Try that in the spring. It delays the monthly shots to 4 or 5 months. Maybe it's
I don't know if that was a
You know what I knew was, even though we didn't know my Don, do you need this? Need this?
First time I've gone to the second grade.
Yeah.
I hope that you are feeling really full. And so I invite you to settle into your seat wherever you are. And we're going to open up with some words of worship this evening. And so I want to also welcome all of our folks who are joining us online tonight. Welcome, and we're excited to worship and have this presentation tonight. You'll be able to find the words up on the screen, but there's also papers on your table. So feel free to pass those around and share them. And we invite you to respond in that bold face print. The Lord be with you and also with you. Let us pray. Gathering Lord, you call us together through the love of your Son to care for all your children. Strengthen our hearts with love. Broaden our minds through your Holy Spirit, and empower us through your compassion to better see others around us as our neighbors and sisters and brothers in Christ, so that we might welcome all into your midst and care for them as you have cared for us. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.
A reading from Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, an expert in the law, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I invite you to join us in singing the hymn that is found on the back of your sheets.
Saints and children, come amongst you to I invite you to flip your sheet back over and join me in our responsive reading. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. God's love never comes to an end. You are faithful to us and gather us together.
Your faithfulness, O Lord, is great.
We should respond to your faithfulness.
And therefore we will work together to the cause.
It is right for us to share your love and faithfulness with all people. We are called to love our neighbor and welcome all. Amen. Cindy, I'm going to invite you up.
Hello?
Okay.
All are welcome. What a great way to begin this evening. Thank you, Joel, and thank you, Sharon, for picking out such a perfect hymn for us. My name is Cindy Decker, and I'm the coordinator for the Hunger Poverty Action Group, the HPAG. We are excited to host the meeting tonight on the Afghan refugee resettlement efforts in Roanoke. Our thanks to everyone for being here tonight, and special thanks to the Hospitality Committee, the Streaming Committee, and all the people who support these OMG events. There are two other upcoming HPAG events that we will be co-hosting. One will be with the Trinity Youth, the canned food drive on Super Bowl Sunday, February 12th, and our second annual Empty Bowls event on Saturday, the 22nd. This is the second year we've done this. It's very exciting. I hope you'll mark that on your calendars. Both events support the local food banks in this area. So anyone interested in helping with either the Super Bowl Sunday or Empty Bowls, please see me after the meeting. We're always looking for extra hands to help. In August 2021, a month after Kabul fell to the Taliban, Catholic Charities was asked by the State Department to help with the arrival of a large number of resulting refugees. This is one of the largest influx of refugees in the agency's 95-year history. Staff was increased in several locations, including the operation in Roanoke. One of the many organizations that volunteered to help was Christ Episcopal Church in Roanoke. Retired Reverend Jan Therian, along with another congregational member, Joe Mott, over there, formed the Episcopal Community Sponsorship Roanoke. It was the first faith group to become part of the Catholic Community Sponsorship Program, and they are currently assisting 2 Afghan families. Reverend Therian planned to be with us tonight, but will be having surgery on January 20th, and is currently involved with all the things that go into pre-op. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. Please keep her and her doctors in your prayers for a successful outcome. Episcopal community sponsorship involves 7 Episcopal churches in the Virginia diocese. Trinity is one of the 7. We have provided support through Trinity Treasures, helping to furnish one of the refugee homes, and providing funds through the pastor's discretionary fund to buy new winter coats and bicycles. Our speaker tonight, Joe Mott, is a native of Northern Virginia. And for those of you from that area, you'll recognize these names. He attended Oakton High School and received his undergraduate degree from George Mason University. He earned a Juris Doctorate from the University of Richmond's T.C. Williams School of Law in 1981. His law career is extensive, having worked in private practice, the Virginia state government, and with the defense and state departments. In talking with Joe last week to discuss the program and where we are located, Trinity is located, I asked him if he'd ever been here, and he said, well, no. And then, trying to be helpful, I asked if he was familiar with the Moneta area, to which he replied, well, I was the assistant Commonwealth's attorney for Franklin County for 5 years. Obviously, I didn't need to worry about him finding his way. He has also served as the assistant United States attorney for the Western District of Virginia for 12 years, as a resident legal advisor in Iraq for 2 years, an instructor for trial advocacy for Pakistani prosecutors in Islamabad and Karachi, Pakistan, 1 year. And from 2018 to 2022, he was the Justice Attaché in Kabul, Afghanistan. On a personal note, he and his wife have 4 adult children. He has traveled extensively in Europe and Asia, is a certified general automobile mechanic, and has served as a judge for the National Corvette Restorers Society and the Rolls Owners Club. And he qualified for and completed the 2015 Boston Marathon. Joe, we are delighted you could join us tonight and provide the opportunity for us to learn more about your experiences in country and the refugee community in Roanoke, where all are welcome. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Mr. Joe Mott.
Thank you, Cindy. I always have my coffee handy. Thank you for that kind introduction, Cindy. And I also want to thank, at the outset, thank this parish for all its help in the resettlement effort. I remember when one of our families was first moving in, you responded, it was within days, it may have been within hours, to a call for furnishings, and essentially furnished an entire townhouse for one of the families. And that was very kind in a time of need. I also Jan Therian really wanted to be here. And unfortunately, they kind of moved her surgery up to where she had to go to Durham for some preparatory work prior to her surgery. So she's certainly in our prayers, and I appreciate your prayers for her. She's been a real force of nature in this effort. Let me, if we could get the screen up. Like Cindy said, I was with the Department of Justice for a number of years. I was the Assistant Commonwealth Attorney here from 84 to 89. Was there until May of 2021. and had a bunch of different positions in the office. One thing that's not that well known is that DOJ has an overseas presence. They do a lot of prosecutorial development and training overseas, and I kind of got into that crowd and did a number of overseas missions. Several short-term trainings, just trial advocacy work for prosecutors in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Bosnia, and not the typical garden spots of the world, but that's where you go, where you need it. And from 2007 to 2009, took a job as a resident legal advisor. I wound up being the rule of law team leader on a provincial reconstruction team in Tikrit, Iraq, and then career took a position as the justice attaché in Kabul from November 2018 to November 2020. It was a one-year detail. I extended once, wound up being there 2 years. The justice attaché position had a lot of different jobs. You were kind of if the ambassador had a question about a court case that was going on or some legal question, I'd try to answer that for him. There was a lot of training involved of Afghans. The attaché is also the coordinator for all of the DOJ components that are in the country. In the time I was there, that was the DEA and the FBI. The Marshal Service had been there earlier, but had left. So, I'd done about everything there was to do in the office and decided to apply for and take this job in Afghanistan. Now, here's the quiz portion of the show. I wish I had some fabulous prizes, but I don't. I think there are a total of 7 stands. Can anybody tell me what this country is? Exactly. Who answered that? All right. Now we'll get a little harder. Well, this one you probably know. First was Afghanistan. The kind of reddish. All right, that one? Exactly. Okay, we all know Saudi Arabia. How about this one? Right? That's my old hometown from 07 to 09. Over here in the orange, bordering Afghanistan. Pakistan. Exactly, and you get a little bit of blue with India there. But now we get a little tougher here. No, Kazakhstan's up here, I think.
I think that's Uzbekistan.
Tajikistan, exactly. Yellow's Tajikistan. Next to it? I beg your pardon. No, that's Turkmenistan. Next to Turkmenistan? That's Uzbekistan in the orange. And then the little kind of pinkish guy right here. Tajikistan. So I think there's 7 stands. I haven't been keeping track. But here's the big prize. If anybody can name that yellow country, they'd win the grand prize. And if you can name it, you'd have to spell it too. But that's Kyrgyzstan. I actually know a guy who spent a year in Dushanbe, Kyrgyzstan, as a resident legal advisor. So I guess the point to all that is Central Asia is not well known. It's not really the Middle East. It's Central Asia. One surprising little matter is if you look at Afghanistan, there's a little finger of Afghanistan. And you know what that blue there at the edge of the thing is? It's China. A little finger up in the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan goes over and touches China. It's a really rugged, mountainous country. It used to be known as Kafiristan, the land of the unbelievers, the Kafirs. Now it's called Nuristan, but it's because it was one area that was never conquered during the Muslim conquest. It was still tribal and hadn't converted. As you can see, Afghanistan, kind of towards the northeast of the country here, very mountainous. Over in here is where K2 and a lot of the Himalayan peaks are. It's a very rugged country. Kind of towards the southwest, it becomes flatter, desert. Most of the agriculture has to be done by irrigation from rivers and snowmelt and irrigation canals and that sort of thing. It's divided up into 34 provinces. Kabul's right here. That's the capital. A huge city, contains, I think, about a fifth of the country's population. Just in the capital, about 7 million people. Ethnically, it's an amalgam, kind of in the southwest and along this border with Pakistan. Is heavily Pashtun. They speak Pashto as the language. When the British drew the boundary called the Durand Line, there was some thought to creating a Pashtunistan, but that never happened. Towards the north, there's a mixture of Turkmens, Tajiks, Uzbeks, and there's a big blend of populations. Oddly enough, they all seem to get along fairly well compared to many countries. When I was in Iraq, there was the country kind of degenerated. It was a very violent time from 07 to 06, 07, 08, before it settled down a little bit. But it almost came to a civil war between Shia and Sunni, and they were killing each other at a large rate. But there's never been that kind of level of sectarian violence in Afghanistan as there was in Iraq during those years. In terms of history, it's historically been the crossroads between Europe and Asia, so it's been a trading route. Marco Polo and all the caravan routes. Alexander the Great came in 332 BC. Let me get something up here. Muslim conquest came from the west and conquered the country, I think in the 800s, and it's been Muslim ever since, with just small minorities, besides small religious minorities besides the Muslims. The Mongols came along and basically really tore the country up in the 1200s. One of the interesting things, the two families we have are what are called Hazara. It's an ethnic minority in Afghanistan, historically oppressed, currently being oppressed. Kept out of government jobs, etc. A lot of violence towards Hazaras. But the legend is that when Genghis Khan left, he left behind 1,000 people to kind of govern the country, and the Hazara means 1,000. And that's where the name came from. And they have like vaguely Oriental features, and Afghans tell me they can tell a Hazara by appearance. I can't really do it, but they say they can. And many of them have more Oriental features that do distinguish them from the rest of the population. Okay, they had, in more modern, just to get through it, they had 3 Anglo-Afghan wars. Nobody's ever really held on to the country. There was a Marxist takeover that the Russians supported, and that we supported the Mujahideen against them, Charlie Wilson's war, all that time period. After that, there was essentially a civil war between different warlords and the Taliban, which resulted in a lot of bloodshed all around the country. And then eventually the Taliban won out in that, and then along they invite Osama bin Laden in, and 9/11 happens, and then the U.S. invades about a month and a half after 9/11 and quickly conquers the country. That went on for years, and then that brought me to going to Kabul in November 2018. But before I went, you get a couple weeks of training, a week of Afghan familiarization up at the State Department. Took some security training and evasive driving up at Bill Scott Raceway and Summit Point. I was going armed. I had to qualify with a M4 rifle and a pistol with Marshal Service before I went. And then the job was at the embassy in Kabul. It was a huge facility. I think the largest, maybe second largest. The main was over on what they call the west side. I lived in these buildings over here, SDAC. Across this road, we named Pennsylvania Avenue, was the other side of the compound. And then next to that was what they called Resolute Support, was the NATO facility over there. The helicopter landing field was right there. It's also where we played softball, which was interesting because it's hard packed, and if a ball got past you in the outfield, it was going. It was going to keep rolling. The other thing, helicopters would come in and out every 5 or 10 minutes, so you constantly had to clear the field in order to finish your game. First, I lived in containerized housing. Later on, I got a little nicer quarters. It was a fairly high-ranking position. It was a great position, which enabled me to do some things that maybe I couldn't have done otherwise. One problem, I may touch on it in a minute, but security was not good. We had to take a helicopter ride from the airport to the embassy compound, even though it was like a 4 or 5 mile drive. When you went out, you had to go out in a 4 armored vehicle convoy. You couldn't spend more than 3 hours on venue. So that didn't enable a lot of deep discussion with your Afghan counterparts or, developing any real relationships. But by having this apartment on the weekend, I would typically invite Afghan counterparts over. They could get on the compound, even if I just couldn't go off the compound and hang out with them. And so we would, order pizza. Afghans love pizza. Or have some other kind of food. Some Afghans drank. It wasn't common, but there's some truth in wine occasionally that you could, get a little ground truth from your counterparts, without the official spin on it. This, particular shot is one evening. These were both prosecutors with the Attorney General's office at the Afghan Terrorism Court. This guy was actually a reservist. He was on AUSA out of Kentucky, and that was his co-worker. This fellow right here, this guy named Matt Kiley. He was a deputy marshal on the Deputy Attorney General's protection detail before he went to Afghanistan, and served as my chief of staff. Security was not good. I think I covered all that. That you had to do it, do your movement request in advance, had to be approved by the regional security officer. I couldn't stay more than 3 hours on venue. I mentioned that a lot of the movement was by helicopter. Can you click on that to see if it goes live? There's actually a video embedded in that, I think. It's just a cool video. This is a helicopter landing if it comes up on Pennsylvania Avenue. Helicopters are fun, but if I don't spend any more time in them, I won't be too upset. I guess it's not. Yeah, you see the button there? Not playing? Not doing it, huh? That's all right. We can move on. Here it comes. Those are Vietnam era CH-46s. I think the Navy used them as Sea Knights. The Army used CH-47s. Some of them are pretty old and clunky, but it's kind of wild the way they land right before the trees, right on the street outside the embassy gate. Security conditions were not good. There'd be periodic mortar, rocket attacks, and then you'd get a report like this. The embassy had elaborate security procedures about what you do. You had to do accountability after you had the attack and call it into the central security office. And then you get a report like the POO up here is a point of origin of the fire, and then these would POI would be point of impact. So you get that every few days, and they sound the big voice alarm, and then you call in that all your people are accounted for. This is on a trip to Bagram Airfield, where they had the terrorism court. All the terrorism cases from around the country went there. So that was an important, that and corruption were two main lines of effort. Of course, that old Matt Kiley. The other woman was with, she was a hoot to travel with, but she was with INL, which was responsible for funding training. That was my team. I had 3 employees while I was there, 3 Afghan employees. Afghans made up a large part of the embassy staff. And this is Habib, Tamim, and God, I don't believe it. Sorry, it went out of my head. But that, they were invaluable as interlocutors and interpreters, and kind of setting up meetings, and they'd meet on venue for all of our meetings. These are some of the things that the work involved. It was a great job. It was high tempo, but it really was a good position to be in. The ambassador trusted you, relying on you for good advice. And you got to get out and get around a little bit with all of the different missions that were involved. This is just an example. I could go on. I've got a whole lot of photos. This is a visit to the Afghan Supreme Court. This guy is one of the justices, a guy named Sangari, who had a real good relationship with. And if I ever needed some kind of inside information about what was going on in the Afghan courts, I'd try to prevail upon Judge Sangri. Did a lot of training. Went to Indonesia one time with a group. Kind of towards the end, the U.S. had entered into a withdrawal agreement with the Taliban, and so we were trying to kind of ease into what a post-withdrawal would look like for Afghans. And obviously there was a lot of concern among the Afghans that we worked with that were associated with the government, but we were also trying to see what kind of what a Taliban involvement in government would look like. So towards the end of my time there, I worked for months to make it happen. But there was this fellow was the justice minister under the previous Taliban regime. I wanted to meet with him to see what he thought the rule of law would look like if the Taliban became part of the government. It was really tough to set up. He wanted me to come to his place. The regional security officer was not real crazy about that idea. He didn't want to come to the compound because he didn't want to look like, an American lackey. And so finally set up a meeting at the UN site, kind of a neutral site, and was able to meet with him there. It was kind of chilling. My blood ran cold. He talked about public executions during his time. They were really, and he was basically trying to stroke us and saying, women can be, the Quran allows women to be involved in society, and, kind of ease American apprehension and international apprehension about what the government would look like. But it was certainly an interesting meeting. That's to me doing the interpretation. Oh, the previous guy's Hotak. I don't know how I forgot Hotak's name. We get these kind of odd cases too. At one point, I wound up being a defense lawyer for 4 Navy SEALs that were charged with abusing detainees in Uruzgan province. Kind of one of my predecessors had gotten us involved in that somehow. The SEALs alleged that there was exculpatory evidence in Uruzgan and wanted witnesses to be interviewed there. So I got appointed to the defense team, prevailed upon an Afghan investigator to go to Uruzgan and interview these witnesses. Kind of wrote all that up, sent it back to San Diego where the case was pending. And ultimately, that case got dismissed. So my clients got off. But that was one fascinating thing about the job. Every day there'd be something different when you walked in the door. This is just to give you a flavor of what Kabul looked like. These are all just shots on a typical trip. I don't see a lot of sheep laying in the shade in Roanoke, but that was like downtown Kabul. Some schoolgirls. They wear uniforms typically. They're still, Kabul is cosmopolitan in Afghanistan scales, but there's still some traditional dress for women. This is a wedding hall, and they're really interesting. They're garish. They've got flashing lights at night, but often Afghans will have gigantic weddings in these wedding halls. Spend way too much money on it, but they dot the city. They were also a ripe target for attacks, and there were several while I was there. because there's no security, there's large crowds. Often it'd be like a Hazara wedding that would get bombed. So they were subject to periodic attacks. I just saw this guy on a bicycle. It's amazing what they can do with a bicycle, how much stuff they can get on there. You know, I laugh about it now, but we were a little cautious at the time. We thought it might be a BBIED, a bicycle borne IED, because you never know what's in it. Another guy with a bike, common way to get around. Cattle knocking around the alleys. This one I had to call in for an OSHA complaint. I mean, the guy ride along. I guess he's holding the sacks down. I'm not quite sure what he's doing up there. They got your old donkey cart going around city streets with all the traffic. That's a graveyard. Muslims bury their dead very quickly. You know, there's not kind of waiting around a week or two for the funeral. Within a day or two, they try to get the deceased in the ground. So Zalmay Khalilzad was skulking around the embassy all the time while I was there. He'd come in, he'd come out. And ultimately, they reached an agreement in February of 2020. They almost had one in 2019. You know, oddly enough, I was having a meeting kind of off the grounds with a bunch of Afghan women and other officials about, you know, what could you live with under peace agreement with the Taliban. And, you know, along about 10:30 in the morning, just this gigantic boom, and the windows rattle, and, you know, the big voice comes on, and everybody goes to the center of the building. And as it turns out, there had been a vehicle bomb that killed 2 NATO soldiers, including an American, at the entrance to the Supreme Court, which was right adjacent to the embassy. And that stopped the deal for a while. That was September. And then, you know, Trump pulled the deal back and kind of went on. And then finally, in February of 2020, they entered into this withdrawal agreement. It was, you know, when it came out one night, I was sitting in the cafeteria with some State Department people. They got a copy of the agreement. It's 4 pages. It was poorly written. You know, you wouldn't get much of a grade in law school on it. Maybe that was the result of negotiations and how it had to be. But besides, you know, grammar and completeness, it was just a mess. You know, required the U.S., including all of its contractors, to withdraw by May of 2021. U.S. was supposed to agree to release 5,000 prisoners, although by then we weren't holding any prisoners. The Afghans were holding prisoners, and, you know, required us to release Afghan prisoners, and the Taliban to release 1,000 of the other side. They wouldn't call it the Afghan government. It was always the other side in the peace agreement. The U.S. was to end sanctions. The Taliban was supposed to enter into intra-Afghan negotiations. And they did, but it was kind of a talk and fight thing. You know, you got the watches, we got the time, kind of like how the Paris peace talks wound up for Vietnam. And the Taliban will not allow Al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups to enter into Afghanistan. Of course, that didn't work out so well too, and had the Al-Qaeda, I forget what his rank was, but killed in Afghanistan or in Kabul after we left. So that didn't go too well as we pulled out. The most damaging thing, I think, to the security was pulling all of the contractors out too. We kind of built the Afghan army as a mirror image of our own, which depended heavily on logistics, air supply, that sort of thing. And basically contractors kept the Afghan Air Force flying. They worked on helicopters, worked on attack aircraft, etc. And when they were gone, that adversely affected the Afghan ability to defend itself. So in July and August, Taliban makes steady progress. Now we're in 2020. The provincial capitals fall sequentially, and then ultimately Kabul fell on August 15th. There was a large evacuation effort after that, mainly at the airport. We'd already given up Bagram Airfield by then, and the only place to get out other than overland was through the Kabul airport. There was a large scale evacuation. I think something like 79,000 made it out over 2 weeks. It went on till August 15 to August 31st. My 3 employees had what they call special immigrant visas pending at the time. And they thankfully all ultimately made it out safely. They had kind of aborted trips to the airport where they'd get turned around, or the bus would get attacked, or that sort of thing. And one of them had a 8-month pregnant wife. Another one had a 6-day-old baby, and they were going through the crush at the airport to get out. But thankfully, they all ultimately did make it out and have been resettled in the DC area. There's about 120,000 worldwide. A lot of the other NATO countries accepted Afghans as well. A lot of the Afghans that I worked with came to the US, but a lot went to the UK or Germany or other places as well, who were, other NATO countries primarily. A lot came on what they call these special immigrant visas. If you worked for the US government based on that association. Others, like the 2 families we're currently working with, came on what they call humanitarian parole. And you're paroled into the country on humanitarian grounds. So there were a bunch that came under that program. The refugee resettlement, the State Department kind of carves up the country into territories. In this area, Commonwealth Catholic Charities runs the program. In the DC area, it's Lutheran Family Services, I think is the name. But the country's carved up, and then the State Department gives a basic subsidy to Commonwealth Catholic Charities to support the refugees for 90 days. But after 90 days, they're on their own. And Commonwealth Catholic Charities had the ticket in this area. Currently, I emailed to try to get updated figures. I didn't get a response in time, but there were about 150 to 200 individuals in the Roanoke area and about 27 families that were expected to come. Those numbers may have changed. After Kabul fell, besides the humanitarian parole into the U.S., there's also a refugee program where someone can go to a third country and then seek refuge in the U.S. or any other country in the world. The UN runs a program, the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, I think. And the U.S. has what they call a P1, Priority 1 refugee status for individuals who are not eligible for an SIV because they didn't work for the government, but are in imminent danger of harm from their association with the U.S. government. And a lot of the Afghans that I worked with there kind of fell into that category. Not eligible for an SIV, but eligible for resettlement. So my successor wasn't there long. It was COVID time. He didn't get out much. And I knew a lot more people than he did. So I kind of, after my retirement, I worked for free for DOJ during these P1 applications. And a number of those people have made their way to Pakistan. The trick bag is they've got to get to a third country and then seek refugee status once they get to that third country. But they're on their own once they're there. They're living on their own time, often in a camp or other setup before they are resettled in the U.S. I don't think we've seen large numbers of that category of people yet. Most of the ones that have come came with the initial evacuation. After Afghanistan fell, I found that CCC had this area. I got in touch with them. I was working with them. Their primary need was affordable housing. My sister-in-law had an artist residence program at a big Victorian in Old Southwest, so we were kind of exploring whether that would be suitable. That ultimately didn't work out, but I was affiliating with CCC for that purpose. About that same time, the diocesan effort had a Becoming Beloved Community program going. I think the three wings are racial reconciliation, Afghan resettlement, and LGBTQ+. Woman named Melissa Hayes Smith was the diocesan deacon who was working with that program, and she approached my co-coordinator Jan Therian about kind of working with Afghan resettlement. Jan said yes, and then knew of my interest and enlisted me, and then we began serving as co-coordinators. We ultimately entered in, CCC would offer like three options, level of support. We picked option 2, I think, and entered into a memorandum of understanding that enabled CCC to share information about the Afghans, that might otherwise be private, their social services applications, their work permits, their all of the things that CCC had done. It took a while for the Afghans to arrive. The kind of process was they would come on the airlift, go to a camp, Fort Dix, Fort Lee, someplace like that, Germany, and they would be vetted there, security checks done before they would be turned loose into society. So we entered into this MOU with CCC. That took a while. I think we finally inked it in January of 2022. And then we had 2 families come. First, it was one family of 5, mom and dad, 2 boys, elementary school age boys, and grandma, 81-year-old grandma. Then, we're over there one day in March or April of 2022, and there's 6 more people there. And his brother, who had been in Baltimore, had just kind of moved down. And so now he was living in the townhouse, and they had 11 people in a 3-bedroom townhouse. We took them on as well. That was, mom and dad, 2 young boys, and then 2 adult daughters. What we've, it's been a real journey with the two families. You know, it's a fascinating culture. You know, they do tend to have large families, a lot of children. One interesting statistic, I learned this in the Afghan familiarization class, approximately 60% of marriages are to first cousins. They tend to marry within the family, and maybe that the root of that may be to kind of, it's a hard scrabble existence. You need all the help you can get, so you gotta keep family close to you. You know, tend to have children fairly young, but you know, it's endearing in many ways. They really do have tight family bonds. They're kind of like an Arab tradition of hospitality. They're very hospitable. You can't go over there without getting offered a glass of tea, you know, and sit down and talk for a while before you ever do any business. You know, there's some warts to the culture as well, particularly the treatment of women. You know, they do tend to disappear to an extent into the society. If a woman marries, she basically becomes part of the husband's family and doesn't see a whole lot of her family anymore. But that's, you know, that's typical in the Afghan culture. So, you know, we've been blessed with some really talented people from different parishes. We've got, you know, people that do English as a second language, that taught it, you know, in schools before they retired. We had furnishings for an apartment thanks to this group. Lately there's been a lot of medical. One of the wives is pregnant, and she's going to have a baby next month. And, you know, that entails it's a high-risk pregnancy. She had problems with the last pregnancy. So, you know, that's a twice-a-week visit. You know, the boys have rotten teeth and need dentist visits. So the medical needs exist. You know, we're helping with schools, getting them to schools and kind of just helping them understand what's going on with schools. That, you know, they don't know how to write a note for an absence because someone's sick, you know, just kind of nuts and bolts type thing. Financial literacy. We've got a fellow with St. John's that's what he does for a living. So he's been working with them on financial literacy and budgeting. That's not a popular topic in Afghanistan, or something they worried a lot about. Both these families were very prosperous carpet merchants in Kabul. You know, they when the Taliban came first, they went down to zero because they got oppressed. You know, left, went to Pakistan. The father got killed. Well, he was beaten and then died several days later. And the rest of the family went to Pakistan. But then they came back, you know, made good when the U.S. came. But now they're trying to restart from ground zero again. One of the families can't afford a car, so there's a lot of transportation involved. That's, you know, a lot of the kind man is just in these kind of daily tasks, the transportation and that sort of thing. I've learned a lot of, I never did immigration law. I've learned a lot since. I've prepared asylum applications for the family members. I think 5 are needed. Each adult gets their own application. And that's been quite a trip. The 81-year-old grandma, for instance, is she's not literate. She can't write in Dari, let alone English. She can't read Dari, and she's extremely hard of hearing. And so, you know, when you go, I just went to after you file your asylum application, which is this very detailed application with every relative ever, every place you've ever lived, then you go to an interview. And I knew it was going to be a problem with her. I tried to prep her as best I could, but when you ask her, well, why are you afraid to go back to Afghanistan? And her initial response was, I am an old woman. Who will take care of me? Well, that's probably right. But, what about those Taliban people? But so I went up to the asylum interview last month, and she's so hard of hearing that the translator was in there with her. But it got so loud from him screaming in her ear that the court security officer guys came in, and the hearing officer just kind of had to wave him away. But if it wasn't so worse, it'd be pretty funny. So the asylum applications, essentially, that's a path to a green card and ultimately citizenship, and gives them a more permanent residence in the United States. It's been full of unexpected expectations. I forget who in the group coined that term, but there's always some surprise. Just using the grandma example, I always thought she was Muhammad's mother, my mother. So I'm doing the asylum applications, and you have to list all the relatives, and this isn't adding up. Faiz Begum, yeah. And as it turns out, she's not his mother. She's his aunt. His mother died when he was young, and then her unmarried sister came and lived with them and raised him as her child. But it was, that was the first time I learned that. It was like the day before the asylum applications were due. So there's just constant surprises with them. Just another example from the asylum applications. There's two older daughters of the one family, and the passport said one was 21 and one was 20. A 21-year-old has to file their own application. Well, then you get their national IDs, what they call the Tazkira, and there's different birthdays. And, one of them made her 21. The first clue was one was born in November and the next one was born in March. And I knew, well, that doesn't quite add up. So, you talk to them and say, what's with this birthday thing? You were there. When were they born? That's your birthday. When were they born? And birthdays are not a big deal in Afghanistan. They don't celebrate them. The explanation was, well, you go into the passport office and they say, you look 21. And so they fill it out. And I don't doubt it after a little bit of exposure with government authorities there. So it's been a journey. These are just some shots of the family. This is Faiz Begum, grandma. This is, I call him Naeem, but he's Muhammad Naeem. This is Abdul Karim. One other, I was always taught, going back to Iraq, that Abdul is never a standalone name. It just means servant of or slave of one of the 99 names of Allah. So I call him Kareem, but he doesn't seem to mind Abdul. Everybody else calls him Abdul. And he's the older brother. Those are his kids, and these are Muhammad kids. And this is Ms. Moshe, who's due to have a baby next month. Oops, what did I do? I hit the down button. What did I do wrong? There we go. Just some other shots of some of our members. I think this was the Roanoke Times did an article in September of last year. A woman named Heather Rousseau is on a Secular Society fellowship to write about immigrant issues. She's done one on other countries as well. I think that's the evening Heather is over there. Vice Museum's a sweet old lady, but just wish you could hear better. These are the two moms, Moshta and Friba. Another little interesting cultural thing, men are always named after sort of biblical names, Yusef, Binyamin. Women are generally named after, like one of the daughters is Shabnam, that's morning dew, or to be morning dew, or evening mist, or gentle morning. They have all these kind of beautiful names for the women. We may have gotten involved too much. Jan insisted on doing a birthday party for Moshta, even though they don't celebrate it. And now there's 11 people we may have committed to doing birthday parties for. This is on an asylum interview trip with Kareem's family. We all piled in a car and went to Arlington.
They don't work, they can't work, is that right, Joe?
They can't. They all have work authorizations, and the men are working, and the adult daughters are working for the it's the cosmetics place in Roanoke. I forget the name of it. Yeah. But yeah, they all have work authorizations. They all have Social Security numbers. CCC did get them set up with that. This is following Faye's Begun's hearing access before it. We got up there a little bit early, so they wanted to do the Constitution Avenue tour, and we did. Got shots in front of the Capitol, and Mr. Binyamin kind of looking back towards the Washington Monument. That was that really cold week we had right around Christmas. Warmer times with the family. That's just a cite to the Roanoke Times article. It's the link. So it has, it's been therapeutic for me, after the way things ended up in August of 2021. And we were also lucky. You don't always get a great family to work with, but we got two good ones, and they've been a joy to work with. And I think all the people that have been involved with them have gotten back a lot more than we put in. At least I hope I'm not the only one that feels that way. So it's been quite a journey. Where do we go from here? It's just gonna, keep this going on. I joke with them. I hope to see the boys graduate from high school in a few years. We're going to keep supporting them. We're going to be posting baby needs for the baby on a Sign Up Genius. If anybody, we'll circulate that to the relevant parish representatives. And meals. We'd like to deliver them meals after the baby's born. And we'll have a Sign Up Genius that will have essentially dates that are open to deliver meals to them. So that's the ministry. Any questions about any of that? Yeah.
I don't know anything about the Muslim community in Roanoke, but have they been able to affiliate with the mosque? Or
yeah, they have. Yeah, I think they're Shia, which is a minority sect. Hazara are typically Shia. That's good for me in the asylum applications because that's a good ground to be granted asylum. They've got, they're Hazara, the Shia, they're affiliated with Americans. So they've got that going for them for asylum. But there is a Shia mosque that they're affiliated with. I think there are two other Sunni mosques in town as well. I could have that wrong, but they have.
Can you just say
Anything? Yeah, can you just talk a little bit about their lives as they as they compared to what their lives were like when they left?
Yeah, yeah.
Were they in danger when they were there? Were they in discomfort? Were they,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, well, their lives before August 15th, like I said, they had a good life. They, had a very prosperous carpet shop. They had a gym. They had ultimately 3 rental houses that they rented out to Americans and other internationals. So they had a very good life there. They had quite an odyssey getting out of the country, and they were very fortunate. When the Taliban came, they went into hiding. They contacted one of the people, or one of the companies that had rented their house, was an air charter service that had the embassy air contract in the 2010s. They contacted him. He arranged to help them get out of the country. So they fled from Kabul, went into hiding, ultimately wound up outside of Mazar-e-Sharif, which is in the north. It sounds to me, I never have gotten a straight story. It sounds like they bribed an airport person at Mazar-e-Sharif to let the aircraft take off. And they got 54 family members on a flight out of Mazar-e-Sharif, went to Qatar, ultimately came here on humanitarian parole. There are 3 brothers that live in the Connecticut area. There's another sister that lives in the Roanoke area that we haven't been working with, but they had 54 family members altogether. And here, he's basically working in a body shop, for minimum wage. And both of them are doing that. The spouses aren't working. The adult daughters are working at the factory.
so when they go into hiding like that, they just leave everything
Yeah.
behind?
Yeah, came with a suitcase. Fortunately, they had all their identity papers, which was helpful for the asylum application, and also getting them through the camps and into the country. But they essentially left everything behind. Yeah, and can't get money out. You can't get your money out. If you do have money in the bank there, you can't get it out currently.
So Joe, you said there's 7 different Episcopal communities that are helping out.
Yeah, I think it's 8 actually. I had a list.
Well, I'm just thinking that we're probably more of a distant
Right.
away from all the others that are in more of the Roanoke area. So if there is a way that we can, from a distance, help, there's communication between all of them so that we would know what's going on and if there was something special we could do because we're not right there.
Yeah, and I think Jan and I are both mindful of that Trinity and Rocky Mount, Fincastle, it's not easy for them to, cart people around every day. So, we try to, if there's a need for furniture or for baby clothes and equipment, try to get the outlying parishes to be able to participate that way.
Linda Scruff has been our important contact. And she and Jeff work very closely to get the furniture moved as quickly as.
They came in March 2022. They were in camps up until that time.
How are the children doing in school?
Pretty well, actually. Language is a barrier for both of them. Fortunately, children acquire language at a rapid pace. They're better and better. The oldest boy, Omid, I'm worried about him. He's starting to like girls, and he's this really cute, athletic kid, and he's he's doing well socially, I think.
Tom and I did this in Greensboro. We have this Lutheran Family Services with the Nepal family.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people from Nepal that had come to Greensboro. And we furnished an apartment with them from a group called the Barnabas Company. They had a warehouse where we could go and get furniture for them. And we met our family at the airport. Balloons and a big sign that said welcome. And we had fixed all kinds of things in their apartment. And they had been in a refugee camp for 18 years.
Wow.
And it was the Holy Spirit was right there with us when we took them to that apartment. And Tom gave the lady rides to maternity appointments, and we had a baby shower for her when her baby was born, and it was just a wonderful experience. Everything that we did for a year.
Yeah, yeah. And what happened after the year?
They still are keeping in touch with a lot of people from First Presbyterian. There were 7 of us in a group that helped that one family, but there were a lot of other family members there. The father got a job right away, and the mother didn't work. But every time we go to the apartment to see her, she would want to serve us food, and she would stand back and serve us. But
Yeah.
it was just a great experience to get to know these. They had 2 little girls. It was a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, yeah, and we've been blessed with the families we got because they're so appreciative, they're so intimate, and so it's just been getting to know them. Oh, pardon?
Community, and there's a school. One of the elementary schools was turned into a refugee school. What do they call it? The Welcome Center or something. I can't remember what they call it, but there's so many different nationalities in Greensboro that have come into that community, and the kids get to go to that special school where they learn language and they celebrate their customs, and it's really a great thing.
Yeah, yeah. Here for a while, the boys were going a half a day to Arlo, Alberta for English as a second language, and they go back to Northside for the second half of the day. But I think that's, by the way, I think they've acquired enough language that they don't need to do that anymore.
Last question.
Okay. Have you heard from Catholic Charities? Have you heard from Catholic Charities if they anticipate more Afghani refugees or any from Ukraine?
As to Ukraine, no. And I emailed yesterday to see if they expected any more coming, but I haven't received a response yet. Any more Afghans coming. One other quick cultural note, an Afghani is a unit of currency. That's their money is an Afghani, and actually the Afghans are either a citizen of Afghanistan or a warming shawl that you put on your couch or something.
Joe, we want to thank you so much for coming out tonight. I think it's been a very enlightening and very teaching. Thank you for all that you and Jan and the churches in the city are doing, and we will certainly stay in tune and look for opportunities to support you.
Okay, go ahead, Cindy. Well, it's been a joy, and look forward to going forward as well.
So, Joel, did you want to close this?
Thank you. Just a couple reminders as we leave. If you are willing to help kind of clean up a little bit and pick up, we'd greatly appreciate it. But thank you again for coming tonight. And be safe on the way home.